Hello everybody and welcome back to James v James.
Hello.
We've got a bit of a different format for you this week. It's not a straight debate. We are going to do a movie review. Don't worry though, we're not going completely normie on you. It's not just going to be complete film reviews from here. It is still going to be a bit of a debate because this film.
Well, The Red Pill.
Yeah, I remember when this came out. This was pretty contentious.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was everywhere. I mean, especially on Reddit.
Well, wasn't it in?
Reddit
It came out in 2016,
Reddit
didn't it? So it was like right in the heat of obviously the 2016 election in America. So it's been a major topic for this sort of thing, and obviously feminism. It's a big deal. So I mean, do you want to introduce what the film's about?
Yeah, so the film basically follows a lifetime feminist who worked in kind of the movie industry, and she was an actress, and she kind of felt that she was kind of targeted for being a woman. Totally legit. She went through her life experiences, showed her clips of her when she was younger, and yeah, it totally made sense what she was saying. So she became a very kind of ardent kind of feminist. And then basically kind of ran out of topics to kind of look at. So she thought, well, how about I have a look at men's rights? Because there's a lot of kind of stuff going out there on the news where people are saying, oh, yeah, these people are Nazis, these people are evil. So I thought, okay, it'd be interesting to actually meet them and discuss things with them, actually find out their point of view. And she changed her mind. She kind of jumped sides in a way. Although she was still a feminist in the traditional sense, and there should be equality between the genders, she thought that the men's right was actually the true route to that. And modern feminism, which I would totally agree with this, has now become women over men and has become diluted into ridiculous gender.
Right, yeah, see this is where
identity
we'll start disagreeing in a moment. But I mean, my first grievance with the film is just, I'm pulling this card as someone who went to film school, just how it was made is...
Argument from authority, I mean. Come on.
I'll wave my degree around, you can't stop me.
Well, I've got politics degrees, so I mean, where do you want to go from that?
Yeah, but, well, this is my time to shine, alright? This is where I wave my useless lefty degree around in the air for the one time I get to use it. But yeah, sure. The editing is quite poor, I think. It does this really annoying thing a lot of American films do for this sort of thing, where whenever it has an interview subject come back up, it puts their name on the screen again like you're an idiot. Like they were on screen 2 minutes ago, and you've forgotten, apparently.
Right, okay, but, I mean, forgive me, but I always forget people's names in documentaries, so I'm always really glad when they show someone else.
It kind of doesn't matter, but, like, they keep saying, hey, this guy's the men's rights activist, like you couldn't fucking tell. Like, he's saying the exact same thing he was 2 minutes ago, but it's, it doesn't really treat you with any kind of intelligence. And
that's a really sexist thing to say, James. You should be ashamed.
It's the movie
just because it was made by a woman. I mean,
no, the movie just doesn't respect your intelligence, whoever you are. It's the cat wants to get out. I'm letting the cat out, everyone. Professional podcasting.
Yep.
Cat's out. Sorry, what was I saying? Film shit. Yeah, sorry. Just getting back to it. Yeah, the editing's bad. It's a lot of shot reverse shot. Some of the interviews are edited in really weird ways where I'm not saying that they were manipulative or like that she was trying to change what they were saying, but some of them had some very strange cuts, like in the middle of sentences, that made me question it. And considering how little the feminist perspective is in there, like it's 80-20 at best. Like the feminists are very
but that's okay though, because we're
but
we're fed a diet of extreme feminism every day. I mean, to have actually a documentary based on the other side of the argument, we know the feminist viewpoint. We know the argument from the feminists.
I do get that point, and yeah, in terms of the amount, I don't mind that so much, because I get that the feminists weren't going to be obviously centre stage in a film about men's rights. But I'm just saying that the way the interviews were edited, again, I'm not saying it was manipulative, but the way it was edited makes me question it a little bit, because it seems like certain halves of sentences were cut out. This is just the editor and me talking, I think it looked a bit weird, and that frustrated me. So
in terms of that, because obviously I'm not just going to praise it, because I agree with the conclusion or the premise. She starts off saying, in the first 15 minutes, I now agree with these guys, and then presents the case showing that she agrees with their premise.
Yeah,
and that to me was actually lazy intellectually.
She
should have let it go right to the end in the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes even go, I now agree with these guys.
The way it's
let you make up
the way it's edited is it starts from the premise of I've agreed with these guys. It doesn't feel like a journey. Like you don't feel her progression. She just says, oh, I ended up agreeing
Yeah.
with these guys, and here's why, and then it shows the emotional interviews, which clearly she got to that point, but from a filmmaking perspective, it's not how I would have structured the edit.
Yeah, well, from
And,
even
yeah.
an essay perspective.
Yeah, from an essay perspective, it's not great. And there's a lot of sections where she does these little diary entries that feel very navel-gazy, where it's like, she's like, oh no, what did they do to my feminism? I've got to try and reassess myself. And it's all very much from her perspective. She's not trying to present these as
Sure.
as neutral arguments. And it feels, I don't want to insult her intelligence, but it feels like she acts very naive in the way that she approaches these things, even though she's a feminist.
But she's appealing to feminists, so she's got to appeal to people who are naive.
I suppose so, yeah. But it's just that the way that she presents herself, like whenever she's sitting in an interview, she's sitting on a sofa with like just very laid back. The camera keeps her in frame rather than punching in on the interview subject, and it's very much framed as like she's almost like she's a child being told all this stuff.
Yeah,
I that's how it's filmed. I'm not saying that that's what she intended, or that it comes across like the way she's framed in the actual frame.
I think, in terms of the actual the presenter, in terms of the way it was structured, I think we both agree.
Yeah.
Intellectually,
I'm just
in
getting-
terms of is it filmography? Is that the
Yeah,
word?
that's a word. You got a word in there.
It's not quite up to scratch there. But I think the main premise of it, I mean, you're saying she was acting like almost like a child, and it struck me that she was trying to appeal to a certain group of people, which were feminists, right?
Well,
which is based
I mean,
on identity
yeah.
politics. Because, and the reason why I say this, I know I say this a lot, but the reason I'm saying this is because the fact that she is a woman and saying, I agree with this, keeps people watching it. And that might have been why, because a lot of feminists would have gone, keyboard rage and pressed escape key and stopped watching it. She had to say, I agree with these guys, and you know what, I'm a woman, so therefore follow me on this journey. That was the gist. That's how I got it. That's the gist that I got.
Yeah, true. I mean, I'm just making my film gripes with it
fair enough,
before I jump into
You're far more qualified
before I jump
to,
into the rest of the ideological
to
stuff.
scrutinise the film aspect.
Also, just from the perspective of the title, this isn't her fault at all, but the red pill, I have to have a major problem with just the American right for coining that term or using that term. Because America, you're the only ones who use red to mean conservative.
Well, they meant red pill as in, do you take the blue pill and follow
I know
the crazy
where- yeah.
leftist mid-1960s view of society how it is now, which is not based on reality, or do you take the red pill, which looks at society how it really is? And
I know where it comes from. Obviously, it's from The Matrix. Yeah, but the American conservative movement uses red pill quite a lot. Like I've heard Milo use it, and it's basically a lot of the people who say they got red pilled is that they stopped being liberal, and red is only associated with conservatism in America. Everywhere else, it's communism, socialism, the blood of the working people. Blue is meant to be this royalist color because up until the 1900s, blue was a very hard color to come by in terms of dye, and only the rich had it. That's why the conservatives have blue. And the funniest thing for me, this is totally off topic, but the reason that they have red as their colour for conservatism is literally because in the 1980 election, colour TVs were in for the first. You could rely on an American having colour TVs, and when they were covering the Reagan,
Nixon, wasn't it?
Reagan,
was
the
it?
Reagan
Right.
election, it was the first time where they could reasonably expect an American audience to have a colour TV. So they said, we're going to colour code this map, and we're using red for Reagan. It's like a child, like explaining colours. What does red start with? R Reagan. Yeah, that's and it's like, and it's stuck since then. Like that, it's just one new studio.
Which is funny because the term better dead than red,
right? It's
right?
Like,
was the 50s
and that
60s.
literally like the term red state, blue state only came in with Bush, like George W. Bush, in our lifetimes. Like that's how new.
Seriously?
That's how new it is.
Wow.
Yeah, red state and blue state is very new, and I do wish that they would just, like with the metric system and everything else, just join us in standardizing. Like
I prefer 5'8". I prefer pint. I prefer it was 500 miles. It wasn't kilometers. It was miles, mate. All right.
Oh, I'm a huge hypocrite. I'm not actually I'm not gonna start saying I'm 1 point whatever meters. Like it doesn't sound nearly as fun.
Because I always have to go, how tall is that? And I have to convert it on Google.
Yeah,
it's
no,
a pain in the ass.
No, I know that we should and they should, but For the sake of standardization, I wish that they'd... Also, one last...
The metric system was made by the French, which
Yeah.
obviously I'm not going to support.
But one last off-topic thing, that the red pill thing being from the Matrix, it's used obviously by conservatives, and people who would be against trans rights generally, which is hilarious now because both.
Wait, why?
Just from what I've seen of people who say they got red pilled, they're generally. Certainly not for the...
Right, I see what you mean.
They're generally against trans rights, and it's super funny now because both of the Wachowskis have come out as trans, so they're the Wachowski sisters now, and The Matrix has been reinterpreted by a lot of people as a trans narrative, so it's super funny to me that people use red pill.
I guess the idea of red pill goes back to kind of like a social Darwinism kind of way of looking at the world, in the same way that is kind of male and female dynamics, the red pill.
I don't know.
Alpha male, beta male kind of thing, and
that
transgender not being a real thing because it's not. It goes on into all of that kind of.
It's a whole
thing.
philosophy
Sure.
to a certain extent,
Surely.
but it is just funny to me that people who are generally against trans rights are using a movie that is very much made by trans people and has a transgender subtext. If you look for it, that's just funny to me.
Yeah, sure, but I still view the red pill, blue pill thing as a way of saying, wake up from your liberal dream.
That's what I find quite pretentious.
That's the
And
main thing.
I'd find it pretentious even if it was on the left. People doing that of just saying, you've been lied to, man. It's all about the system. They're confusing you and it's all in your head and you've got to wake up from being programmed. Like, anyone who says it that way, even if you were right, it's a dick way to phrase it.
Yeah, I'm not saying these people are nice people.
No, exactly. But we'll get into that a bit more with the red pill, the larger red pill movement. But going into it, like, because obviously it's about men's rights activism. I mean, do you want to give your view a little bit on just like men's rights activism, just to
I think this has to be a very recent modern thing, because even going back into the 1990s, there was severe imbalances with men and women when it came to pay. When it came to rights in the workplace, etc., etc. But this is now changing. I mean, it's only since the late 1980s that actually rape was legal within a marriage. I mean, that's pretty late on. That's been made legal. So we have seen a huge shift in culture from the 1990s to now, where actually these differences aren't so large, if they're at all. They're negligible. If you look at pay gap differences. If you look at, again, you talk about domestic violence there, look at differences there. Actually, what was it, 57%, 43%? That was the ratio of men to women violence.
Yeah, it's meant to be pretty close.
I mean, that's never talked about. So I think it covers a broad range of issues, but I think ultimately, culture has changed. I don't think the society has actually changed fast enough with it. So I think this movie was basically saying, actually, if you look at the stats, if you look at the way it is built, and the way society is now, it's not what we've been told.
Yeah, I find it quite interesting the way the right tackles this. Is that everyone's very happy to say, oh, of course, all these other countries definitely oppress women, and even we oppressed women 20 years ago, but now everything's sorted. Literally, that's the same rhetoric that they were using back in the 70s. Everyone feels like the status quo is fine until like everything changes.
In what sense?
Well, just like, for example, in the 70s, like, people thought women's rights had pretty much all been sorted just because the rules of equal pay had been put in. Like, that doesn't mean that they were being followed, and it doesn't mean that sexual harassment wasn't still a major issue. It's always in retrospect that we always look back on it and say, wow, yeah, that actually was pretty sexist, and it's never in the moment that people seem at large happy to say that these are definite problems. Like, to say that all the problems have been solved now, I think is a bit disingenuous,
It's more like a dialectic thing, isn't it? It's kind of like, okay, it was super on the men's side, and then we had the women's rights. Rather than getting to like a fair medium, society is still going through is now going to the other extreme. It's kind of like, it goes back to the whole kind of like Marxist argument thing, where things kind of go from extreme to extreme until you find a middle.
Right.
So I kind of view this in the women's rights issue as sorry, I've got a bit of a sore throat. If anyone hasn't noticed.
No problem.
I'm kind of seeing this as the way it's being formed now, in the sense that actually now it has swung to the pendulum. We never reached equilibrium.
No,
and maybe we will do in the next 40 years. But you need men's rights advocates to go, whoa, guys, yeah, good, but slow down. well, this has happened and this has happened now, which actually is swung it the other way, and we must address this. And that's totally
I
fine.
find it interesting, near the end of the movie, even the men's rights activists admit that trying to quantify the stuff and say that one side is definitely much more weighted than the other, it's unnecessary and unlikely to lead to truth. Yet a lot of them do seem to say, no, it's definitely weighted in the way of feminists being more in power. You know, I'm all fine to acknowledge that there are definitely problems that affect men much more. You know, they admit, you know, the things that they pointed out statistically. Yeah, I can't argue against
The
that.
suicide rates, that kind of thing, the depression.
There are some things where they bring up
work-related deaths.
those are things that I think they're being a bit hypocritical about, because when it comes to, well, this is my point. They will criticize feminism for bringing up the wage gap, because they say, oh well, women make different choices in terms of where they go to work, right? So if you're willing to make that kind of allowance for when women are working, you should also admit that, like, how much is it about personal responsibility? The fact is, men choose to do those jobs. If you say that their responsibility doesn't matter in those cases and it's still a problem for them, then you should also have the same logic for women. You know, it's one way or the other. I have to say both of them are affected by the large community or by their choices. You know?
No, because the difference is that men aren't saying, it's so unfair, we need more women in the sewers. But women are saying, oh, it's so unfair, we need more women in politics or business or finance. So actually there is a double standard there. Women have made the choices, men have made their choices. I mean, if you look at Sweden, the most advanced country in the world for gender relations, you're actually finding an overwhelmingly huge amount of women going into more kind of social professions, like nursing or childcare, rather than societies like China, where if you've got to make money, women are going into STEM research and science. Okay, but when people actually have a choice, men choose more quote-unquote masculine roles, and women will choose quote-unquote more feminine roles. But then to accept that is fine, but then to say, actually, but we need quotas for women in certain parts of government or business is going back on that. So how does that work?
Well, I'm just saying it needs to be equal. Like, if the argument is basically from the men's rights perspective, we should get rid of these things that help women get into these professions, and that it's just a matter of choice, that they just choose different things, and we're not helping things by having these quotas. If that's the rhetoric for women, it should be the same thing on the side of men, where it's like, well, they just choose different jobs. You know.
But that's what the men are saying. So tell me about the quotas for women in the sewage system.
The point of feminism is that obviously that women are being denied from leadership positions. It's not.
That's not true, is it?
I'm not debating about the truth. I'm just saying that, like, it's just that's their argument is, look, we want to get into these roles and are being prevented from doing so. You know, in construction, to a certain extent, there is that kind of bias. That's not necessarily a desirable job, but some women do want to go into construction and are prevented from doing so.
But by who?
By bosses who refuse to hire women.
I mean, if you hire a woman in your company, especially in America, I think less so in Europe and the UK, but especially in America, that's seen as a really good thing from a PR perspective. People want to hire women now. Because they're getting such a massive pat on the back by everyone else for doing so. Well,
I mean, they have to pay maternity and potentially other healthcare stuff, like not now because Trump's prevented it, but birth control was something they would have to pay for as part of
birth control.
Yeah, birth control was.
You should pay for your own birth control, I think.
Yeah, that's a debate for another time. Anyway, the point is, I'm just saying that they need to be of equal merit. You know, if you're going to be on the men's rights side of it, saying, because they claim that the male suicide rate and that work deaths rate is a major issue, and yet, like, the argument should be, well, men go into these dangerous jobs. That's the argument you should have if you're going to say women tend to go into lower paying jobs.
Well, totally. Yeah. But the difference is that people are complaining. Men earn more, and they're complaining. Men are in positions of power, and it's like, well, men frankly do the harder jobs, and they choose to go into that. So you either accept that and you don't cry about it, or you make it a big issue whilst ignoring all the sacrifices men actually make. I mean, in terms of running our infrastructure, that is primarily done by men. And so when there's a system of people who are actually benefiting from the hard labour of one group of people, and then claiming they're evil and oppressors, that to me is just, it's not only ungrateful, but it's actually quite nasty.
Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to the day where automation removes this debate and we don't have to send anyone into dangerous jobs.
Ooh, yeah.
But up until that point, women want to be able to go into leadership roles where they've been potentially denied. Men, if their argument is we don't want to go into these dangerous jobs, then you can look for jobs that aren't dangerous. It's the men aren't prevented from doing non-dangerous jobs. Really, like you can be a man who works as an accountant or whatever. Like the dangerous jobs, there's supposedly more of an attraction in terms of to men than women for those because of testosterone and everything. Wanting to do the more dangerous jobs like lumberjack and everything.
Right.
But at some point you do have to account choice into it, and I agree with that on the wage side of it, the wage gap side of it. It's
disingenuous, the wage gap. It's propaganda.
I will say that this is a bit just anecdotal, but when my mum did work in HR, she did see women in the same position as men getting paid less. So it does happen. I'm just going to put that out there.
But I had friends who are male who were in the same position as me, a male job, who got paid more because they said, I brought more sales than James, I deserve more money. And that was fine. Practically, am I going to complain about that and say, claim discrimination, that his sales are better than mine, it's not fair? No, I mean, he was worth more to the company than I was.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole other debate, but this was literally like jobs where they were doing the same amount of work and literally they weren't getting the same amount of money. So
is that because men negotiate more?
Statistically speaking, no. Women do ask at the same rate but get it less. Like you can argue about that being like these have been statistical studies that have looked into this, that women do actually ask at the same rate.
I've read the opposite. I've read that men overwhelmingly ask for better rates and women don't.
Well,
we'll have to zip this episode and do a fact check and come back to it.
Yeah,
okay?
We'll definitely do an episode on that specifically. But going back to the film, in terms of the men's rights stuff, the problem that I had with it was mainly that slight hypocrisy where they're happy to hold up statistics as being a major issue for on the men's side of it, where choice might be involved and not, and yet they're happy to criticize feminism on the other side. And I think both sides, they're clearly problems. Like there are social issues. It's not cool that men are the majority of suicides and that there seems to be men being disaffected from society the way it's set up right now. It's not cool that they're dying in these jobs.
That's got sociological underpinnings, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the fact that men are expendable, and that women are more valuable to men in society in terms of, I mean,
this is an interesting...
how many single guys are there compared to single women?
This is an interesting point that gets brought up by Big Red at the end of the film. Big Red, the feminist who's shut the fuck up, buckface.
Oh goodness!
My girl, she's bad.
She's the less version of Milo.
She's not helping anyone really, and it's interesting that she said she'd only been a feminist for 3 years, which was like right before she
it's the mental age of most feminists.
Well, oi.
I'm checking lots else.
No, she basically became a feminist like right before she got famous for doing that shut the fuck up fuckface thing. Like, so I find that very interesting that was basically her baby feminist days. She says at the end that, and she says it very inelegantly, but it is a point that I do somewhat agree with, that idea of men being somewhat expendable and not being seen as primary caregivers is somewhat derived from patriarchal thinking.
You just said to me that men are fueled from testosterone and men are the ones who have to do the hard jobs, and patriarchy, well, any system has to work through the labour of men. Right? So to then say, well, actually, that comes from patriarchal thinking, is you're kind of contradicting yourself there a bit.
Patriarchy is not... This is one of those things that gets very misread from feminist thinking, and it's easy because patriarchy, patriarch, it's in the name.
Yeah.
It gets blamed as being sort of this thing of men are to blame for everything, and there's a sinister cabal of men controlling everything. And it's not necessarily meant to be like that or a value judgment. It's meant to be basically... It does acknowledge that men are in the controlling positions. Men obviously are the CEOs, they're the politicians, and they're in the controlling positions where women aren't. So it acknowledges that and says that that's problematic. Favourite word of the day. But
my skin was crawling.
Right? But it acknowledges that, but it's also meant to be basically that masculine traits and masculine energy is the driving force of a society, and things that are seen as feminine are not necessarily derided, but seen as secondary. So it's so masculinity, even when even its, I'm gonna say the word, toxic aspects, even its toxic aspects are considered to be acceptable and just part of the society. So saying that men are meant to be emotionless, they're just meant to be the provider. They don't have to be emotionally there for their kids. The mother's meant to be the primary caregiver, and the father doesn't matter. The father's disposable. The father can die in war. That is the system that is patriarchy. Patriarchy affects men, and not necessarily in positive ways. Men, get to be in control, but they also, because of that, the system that patriarchy is, they end up hurt in a lot of ways. And modern feminism seeks to stop that.
Just to get in there, I think when it comes down to the whole emotional aspect, of course, I'm for men being emotional. Men should cry.
Yeah,
in my opinion, I think men should talk about their issues, and men should be more open. I think those toxic aspects of, as you want to call patriarchy, that's not healthy. When I talk about men being expendable, though, I'm talking about the way society is structured, in the sense that the majority of men don't have positions of power. So to say that, patriarchy is men in power, it's just not really correct. It's like a top percentile of men in power. Okay, the vast majority of everyone else don't really have anything. In terms of socially and economic. I mean, if you look at monarchy, you get people like Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth I. They were matriarchs in a patriarchal society. But why does it not matter? Well, let me finish what I'm saying. Why does it not matter? Because of class. And so this is a class issue again. It's not men versus women. It's not men in charge versus women.
Those women,
that's
like Elizabeth I, had to make sure that she had to remove all her feminine, pretty aspects. She blackened her teeth. She tried to make herself ugly, because if she had been pretty, she would have been seen as somewhat slutty. Like, she had to keep she was called the Virgin Queen. Queen Victoria,
she was an Aphrodite, wasn't she?
Let's not get into that.
That's what people say. That's what a lot of historians are saying.
And
respected historians.
Yeah, and some people say she was a lesbian. Like, let's not get into the drawers of ancient monarchs for now. But
right. But the main point is that it's not like it's a class thing. Men are expendable because they haven't got any power. It's only a tiny percentage of people have the power. So when people turn around going, when feminists are saying, men are oppressing us, men are this, men have all the power, men have all that, they're talking about, again, a tiny percentage of people. They're not the vast majority of men have low incomes and don't have much. And I was sitting there with a little beer going, what are you on about? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, this is what I hear from a lot of people who are right wing when they want to criticize feminism. They say, well, I'm not in power. And this is where I go back to the point that patriarchy isn't meant to be this idea that all men... This is something I was saying about privilege. Privilege isn't just... Like, a lot of people make jokes about, where's my white privilege check? Like, they think that privilege means you get extra stuff or that you get extra power. Privilege in general is meant to be that you get to be the default. You get to be on a base level, and others are disadvantaged from you. It's not so much that you get extra or that you are definitely in power. Yeah, you're right. Most men aren't obviously at the top of the food chain, but in terms of a household, the man is meant to be the breadwinner and meant to be the one who sets the agenda.
He has to be in most cases because women have to have that career break. Most women.
True, but in a really functional... You're kind of
stuck in this biological clock, aren't you?
But in a functional relationship, both voices should be heard, and it should be sort of a democratic process. Like, that's what a good relationship looks like.
Obviously, but most in a democratic relationship, most parties agree that actually, over these years, the 10 years from maybe 25 to 35 or up to 40. I'll have to take the back seat, look after the kids, while you go out and work. And unfortunately, that is just a time where your career really blossoms. But you can't change that. And to then say, okay, well, there's huge pay gaps in men and women, based on that, is just, again, it's disingenuous, isn't it?
It's not necessarily the man that has to go out and work. It's a growing thing now of the stay-at-home dad and the woman who gets to go to work. So, and neither is necessarily better than the other. I think both are, if a woman wants to stay at home and raise kids and the dad goes out and they've democratically decided that and that works, that great, it's all good for them. No one's against that. Bringing it back to the movie, speaking of the family dynamic, most of the things that the MRA guys bring up, like in terms of the suicide and the job death rates and stuff, that's more just like social criticisms. It's like what they criticize third wave feminism for being, of just being this trying to change the culture thing and not being about solid goals. The only solid goals that they really do bring up are the fact that fathers are incredibly disadvantaged in
Yeah.
divorce courts, and
That's pretty disgusting, though, isn't it?
and the abuse side of it, and yeah, those are bad. Yeah, the stories there are pretty heart wrenching. The editing is quite quite skewed to make those very emotional and like hit really hard. But yeah, they are just generally quite emotional stories. You know, the dad who said his wife got pregnant like without him consenting to it,
Yeah.
and having to send alimony checks when they broke up, and she's like making the child a beast. Like, that's fucked up. That is definitely fucked up. And yeah, no, that is something that does need to change. I will say that one of the problems that I have with the men's rights activist movement being its own separate thing is that a lot of these are feminist arguments, and there are a lot of modern feminists that I know within the school of feminism who point that out as like, this is not good for anyone. This is the gender imbalance that we try to fight.
Those are, that's the thing, James. There's a lot of rational people on both sides. You know, we kind of talk, we say left and right. Yeah, there's people on both sides of the kind of the ideological divide who do share the same goals. We just disagree on how to get there. But there are some people on the fringes who are now starting to dominate the culture. And that's why I would call myself a feminist in the traditional sense. But I'm distinctly anti-feminist in the third wave sense. Because I think it's got to the point where it's just getting ridiculous.
I get the problem, and I get a lot of liberals do say that. You know, they say, oh, well, by the dictionary definition, of course I'm a feminist. It's just you third wave guys that are weird. The thing is, feminism is such a big, broad thing at this point. It's been around for 100 years. It has so many definitions along the way, and those other waves of feminism didn't go away. There are many moderate feminists, and you know, I consider myself to be more on the moderate side of it. There's feminists that deny trans rights. There's feminists that don't care about black women's rights. There's definitely forms of feminism that are incredibly fucked up, and you know, and that's the debate within feminism. I think it gets painted a lot as this big monolithic thing. And that's like those men's rights activists could feasibly set themselves up as a feminist or egalitarian group.
Absolutely, they are feminists
yeah.
by the definition.
Yeah,
surely.
But they But instead, they call themselves men's rights activists, which is, you know, by their own words, they say that men are somehow the underclass, which I think. They complain about feminism for having femme in the name, and they say that's divisive, that's bad, that's creating this culture clash, and it's making everyone angry at each other. And then they go and do the same thing by calling themselves men's rights activists. Like, if they call themselves egalitarians, that would be fine. But when they call themselves men's rights
it's not
activists,
powerful enough. I mean, there's a certain element to these political movements where it's got to be clickbaity, isn't it? And like, you know, I think if you're going to call yourself an egalitarian or a feminist, there'll be no traction. The idea of saying you're a men's rights activist is basically to look at feminism and say, this has got to a point where it's gone too far. And so, yeah, okay, ideologically, you're totally right, but practically, it was the only thing they really could do to get their name out there.
Well, I get it from a marketing point of view. Like, okay, we focus on men's problems, so we want to call ourselves men's rights activism.
Yeah.
The problem is, unlike feminism is old at this point. It's got 1,000 different subgroups. There's no real way to paint it as any one thing. Men's rights activism is very new, and the problem is, this is maybe their own optics problem, but they do a really bad job of policing their own guys, where if you search men's rights activism, like, on Reddit, this isn't just, like, think pieces about it. The groups that are men's rights activists have a lot of angry people who actually hate women in general.
That's because they've been screwed over by the system, which does benefit women now over men.
Well, it's not a matter of whether it's justified or not. I'm just saying that's what it is. Like,
well, yeah, I agree with you.
Like, Elliot Rodgers frequented a lot of those men's rights activists groups. Like, and he had those ideas that he was spreading, that women are all sluts now, but they hate nice guys, and I'm gonna either rape a woman or kill all of them. Like, that's the worst end of it. I'm not saying all,
but I mean,
but that is
the worst end of
no, but that is
left wing philosophy.
But that is very present.
Communist mass execution.
Sure, but it's such a small group, and that the lower end of that kind of stuff, just the general view of women are bitches, right? I see it so much more prevalently. Feminism, you can find very mild feminist communities, whereas with men's rights activists, I haven't seen one yet that didn't at least have one person in there that was very fucking like on the
Yeah,
far
but,
end.
but you can't judge an ideology or a movement or a way of thinking based on the nutters.
But didn't you just say that feminism had been taken over by the nutters?
But that's because it's been taken over by the nutters. I mean, if you look at campus feminism, it's just everywhere. It's all consuming. It's dominating.
If you suggest that is something that happens, then why is it so hard to understand the idea that has also happened to men's rights?
Because
activism?
it hasn't happened to men's rights. Because actually, it's a very, very, very small faction. Left-wing feminism or third-wave feminism. Sorry, left-wing feminism isn't the correct term. Third-wave feminism, especially at universities, has dominated the culture.
Well,
I know a guy who went to university 2 years ago and did a politics thing.
Yeah.
Trust me, it was all consuming.
Yeah, like I said, there are groups of feminism that go quite far away, but like I said, there is so much battle within the feminist community. But feminists get way more angry at each other than they do at outsiders. There are civil wars that are way more brutal in terms of like TERFs and intersectional feminists. They fucking hate each other and consider each other far worse than some of the out groups, you know, like men's rights activists. The problem I have with men's rights activists is it's kind of going back to the debate we had about how easy it is to corrupt big or small organisations from the EU episode. I feel that when it's a small organisation like men's rights activism, the presence of this rabid band of it, it's much more present just as a percentage problem, you know, and the men's rights activist label seems to draw that kind of mentality
I think the issue with the men's rights activist thing is that there's legitimate academics there. We saw some good academics.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
But there's this undercurrent of a lot of guys who have lost in society are the losers, right? Guys who aren't particularly attractive, don't have much economic power, don't have a great education, perhaps. You know, guys who are on the losing side. So there's that anger there, but that doesn't distract from the academic point. That I'm going for here.
Sure.
But actually, they're still right. They're losers, but they're right.
I think
That's what I'm saying.
The frame of feminism tries to put those problems as basically saying you have been told that you were meant to be providers and strong and emotionless, and you didn't live up to that, and now you're very unhappy and angry. You should be against the patriarchal structures. You should be trying to bring equality. And it's not a matter of women or men being at fault. It's just what the world is, and you should be trying to prevent that. But when it's men's rights activism, like in the name, because it was set up so recently, it has a very distinct identity. Feminism is so broad at this point as to be essentially anyone can slap feminism on their beliefs and try to justify it. Men's rights activism is so small that it seems like very easy for the radical parts of it to just take over for people.
See, you say that, and I agree with that premise, but you also agree with my premise that the radical parts of feminism has taken over in the college campuses in particular.
I said it, yeah.
Which are the places where people are being educated, isn't it? It's the places where the youth of today are going to take over the power positions of tomorrow, and there's a lot of fucking nutters.
I think what I'm saying is that men's rights activism could have been set up within the bounds of feminism or within egalitarian.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and within just egalitarian. And I know branding wise, it wouldn't have been as attractive perhaps, but the thing is, if they stuck to their principles, is what I'm saying. Because like I said, they criticize feminism for having femme at the beginning of their name, which at this point, like I said, it's such a broad ideology that doesn't necessarily mean anything. They are just trying to aim for equality, but then they put men in their own name, and like they say no, men are the underclass, and it creates the same kind of conflict that they said that they were against. I think that's very troubling. Well, and whether or not they are trying to push for men's rights, and even if they think men are the underclass, if they stuck by their rhetoric, they would call themselves egalitarians or
again, academically, I agree with you, but in terms of getting your movement out there, would you be drowned out by the feminist crowd? I think also the issue is that, in the 1980s, up to the 1980s and early 1990s, feminists were right in the feminism we understand it. But now they're not. And now it has swung the other way. So these guys do have to take a more radical approach because actually they are the minority now, and they are saying a lot of really interesting things which the feminists aren't really taking into account.
I will say that that in some cases, like Big Red trying to disrupt that seminar on men's rights, and other ones where they're against men's abuse shelters being set up, that's That's quite fucked up.
Even the movie Red Pill was boycotted by feminists all across the US. You don't get men's rights groups boycotting feminist movies.
Well, I'm looking at a poster of Star Wars on my wall right now, and I do remember Return of Kings, a very men's rights activist heavy group trying to boycott it, and
name one that was successful.
Well,
I mean, the culture is on the feminist side.
I'm just saying, like, men's rights activists, they do boycott stuff for being too feminist. It's let's not lay that too much. Boycotts aren't bad. I'm saying, like, where they trying to shut down the men's abuse shelter. Like, didn't the guy who tried to create that commit suicide? I think I remember hearing one guy who tried to set up a men's abuse shelter committed suicide because he was just harassed so much. And guys, that's not cool. Like this, from one feminist to another potentially listening to this, don't fucking do that. That's not.
It's funny because have you watched The Handmaid's Tale?
I have not yet. I've heard good things.
It's really good.
It looks very well filmed, really unlike this documentary.
It's a really good series. But I was sitting there watching it with someone who's close to me, and they were going, "Oh, I reckon we're close to that today. We're close to, like, it going the other way." I was like, "Really?" It's just kind of like cognitive it's like almost solipsistic, in the sense that it's kind of like, well, no, it's nothing like what America is today. But actually, if you go back to Augustus actually overnight took away all women's rights and the right to divorce.
Oh, the Roman Emperor Augustus, yeah.
Right, overnight. And he basically created The Handmaid's Tale.
Right, yeah.
Women were made for reproduction, so that did happen.
Yeah.
But it's not happening now. But the narrative of Handmaid's Tale is very much kind of, oh, women, watch out, this is what could happen to us, when actually we're nowhere near that.
Well, I mean, within the story, all it took was, like, women becoming infertile, which is a very big thing to happen, but it basically, a crisis happened, America reacted very drastically in one political route, which is possible. Like, if
sure.
Like, if the nukes flew with North Korea, God, that's depressingly possible. But
it's not possible. It's not gonna happen.
I'm just
come on.
Well, we'll see. But this is the point. Is with The Handmaid's Tale, it like political events, like scary, massive trauma events like 9/11 changed the landscape of things, and they can very radically. And with Donald Trump in power, he is a very impulsive man, and if a crisis were to occur, I'm not saying he would go Handmaid's Tale, but he could very much do something drastic, and women have a right to be afraid, considering he doesn't seem to care much for their rights at all. Like, this is the man who owned a pageant and was very happy to just walk in on his underage employees
obviously
naked. Like, like, this is the man who this is... We're recording this on the anniversary of the pussy grabbing tape coming out. Like, this is a man who...
I remember that coming out.
Yeah.
And I listened to that thinking, holy shit.
Right, yeah.
And then I thought, okay, you can't win now.
Right, yeah, everyone thought that. Those were nice, innocent times, weren't they? We'll have to do an anniversary special of the election to do a retrospective on that or something.
The thing is, because I'm a massive nerd, I always enjoy American elections.
Yeah.
That's my favourite year every 4 years. People have the World Cup, I have the American election.
Yeah, no, it's a fun time. But yeah, just getting back to the film, both sides kind of spotlight, they don't actually disagree with each other all that much on, like, the actual problems. Like, feminists admit that, yeah, there are problems with men and we should fix that. It's just a matter of priority, and they seem to be screaming at each other in a lot of places where they could probably be helping each other, really. Like, I mean, I know that they've got differences and they clearly don't like each other, but they'd be a lot more effective together than they are apart right now.
Well, I agree with you. Again, academically, yeah. But practically, I kind of get this screaming from the feminists that you don't get from the men's rights activists. So the men's rights, the massive keyboard warriors, yeah. But I mean, the people who are up for debate aren't the feminists at this point.
This is an interesting thing that
I work with. Sorry, I work with a lot of people who describe themselves as feminists, but I don't think they really know what that really means in the traditional sense. But we were talking about the wage gap, and we were talking about oppression in the wages, and I said, well, actually, that's largely a myth now. That's proven not to be true, and the vitriolic kind of anger, people just. I mean, come on, they were shouting at me. I was saying, look, guys, look, let me present my case. And when I finally did, they kind of thought, oh, well, you have to show me the statistics for that. I was like, well, you've never heard this? Have you even studied it? Or no, you've just been told it by the culture, by the propaganda of the culture. And anyone who says anything against it is kind of kind of shouted down or shamed down.
Well, I mean,
you don't get that with the men's rights.
This is one of the disagreements that we had earlier, was this, because you said, oh, Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's so cool, and
he's really cool.
And I, like, my pointing out to that is, it's very easy to be cool and calm and have a smile when you haven't lost anything, or like you're not the oppressed class. Like, and you know, you can disagree about
but again, it's this mid 1960s kind of world the left live in. But it's 2017. I mean, it's not what it was. I mean, you guys are aware of that, right?
Yeah, you can disagree to the level at which oppression exists, but the point that the feminists are saying is, look, we are trying to get this thing that we feel that we deserve, and that the culture is imbalanced, and we're trying to get that thing, and you are denying us that thing. It's very easy for them to get emotional about that. Now, that doesn't help their case.
And it's
but
not
like
fair either, because you can say, well, actually, I disagree with you and you're wrong. Oh, but we're emotional, so therefore it's silly. I mean,
I'm just saying that I can understand where the emotion comes from. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's helpful. You know, it's like another debate for another day. But like I said the same thing about Black Lives Matter. It's just like I get where the emotions come from, and I think that they have valid reasons to be emotional. I don't think it's helpful. You know,
right, well, we'll agree on that.
Yeah.
Back to the Jacob Rees-Mogg thing. Rees-Mogg.
Yeah.
I kept saying Morg.
Yeah.
I realised it's Smog.
I keep saying Palpatine, but
yeah. Well, there was this really interesting video that I watched where there was like a student protesting the Conservative Party conference thing.
Yeah.
And he was shouting at Jacob Rees-Mogg, saying, "You are a despicable man. You're an evil human being. You're evil. You're hurting people. You're killing people." And the guy he responded saying, "Okay, well, look, we disagree. So let's talk about it." And he goes, "No, you're evil." Like, look, you might disagree with my viewpoint, but you can't just stand there and shout at me and call me things when I want you to explain why. And the guy actually couldn't do it. Do you see where there's sort of like a disconnect there? Who are having the debates and who are just shouting and screaming?
Well, like I said, when you're not personally invested in the argument, when like a white person in a debate about black people is like, well, you guys are trying to do this thing to me. I'm fine right now. You know, you want this thing, but I mean, I've got no skin in the game. It's very easy for me to just be a very calm face.
We all share society, right? And we're all part of this big human experiment, aren't we? So actually, no, we all have skin in the game, and to say because you're white, you haven't got any issues here, or you're not actually relevant to the discussion is unfair, because there might be black people who agree with me and white people agree with you. So.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, like, just from the emotions involved, like I said, it's best if you don't get emotional. And yeah, it's great when there is a black person or a woman who just very calmly just makes their case, and that's the best way to do it. And that is how debates should go. I'm just saying I can understand where the emotions come from, because it's you know, it's like how you're saying about you're excusing the men's rights activists for getting emotional because they've been put in a very bad situation, and that sometimes bleeds out in bad places, and that that's what happens.
I'm not saying that's I'm saying the same thing as you here now. I'm not saying it's healthy or good. I'm saying that's just where it comes from.
No, exactly, and we're saying the same thing there. It's like, okay, these people feel angry, they feel like they've been disadvantaged, they're unhappy, that they're obviously their lives are made worse in some way. And there's this calm person just telling them that, like imagine a men's rights activist for a second there, with a woman just calmly saying, well, I mean, what are you talking about? This isn't a real problem. We should be talking about real issues here. And like, if you kept being emotional there...
That's not what they're saying. They're saying, tell me why you think this, and I'll tell you why I disagree. And that's totally fine. If a men's rights activist gets his knickers in a jiffy for that, then he's not really approaching this in an intellectual way.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I've seen emotions get high on, and while they may not get emotionally up in the debates, they do definitely get emotional in r/the Donald and other places.
See, I've been on r/the Donald now that you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Because I never really went on it that much, because I mean, there's a lot of trash talking on there, and it just kind of got a bit... It humours me to be on there. So.
Right, yeah. But yeah, I'm just saying, like, they vent their frustration in different ways, and the way that they do it is to call women sluts online.
Yeah, obviously I'm not like advocating for the fat 31-year-old loser in his mom's basement shouting at women. I'm looking at this from an academic point of view.
Getting close to the end of the movie, I mean, the way it kind of wraps up, like I said, it reached its conclusion a bit too early, so getting to the end of the film, it felt like, yeah, you're just reaffirming your point there a little bit.
It reached a conclusion at the beginning, which is not a way to say... I know, like, okay, academically you're meant to say, I think this, I'm not arguing like my points here, but when you're trying to give, like, when you're not trying to impress a professor, and you're giving a case to the average common man.
And you're trying to tell a story. Like, that's,
Well,
a documentary
you want-
has to have, like, a narrative, even if it's...
You want them to come to the conclusion, right? Rather than you saying the conclusion at the beginning. So yeah, the way it was set up was disingenuous.
Yeah.
But actually, the content I thought was actually pretty good.
And the feminists I know are perhaps a bit smarter than the feminists you've encountered, because they tend to know this stuff, and they do care about men's issues. They say, yeah, men have been let down just as much, where men were told to be emotionless and cold and strong and always be the provider, and modern capitalism is not providing that in any kind of way. And yeah, that's something we need to deal with. So yeah, the feminism has your back on this, you know. It's like the men's rights activists get very hostile towards feminism and do go after them in some places where, like, there's been multiple raids on places like Tumblr and the like, where they're just like, fuck feminism. Like, my cousin Ella, she's a feminist, and she'll get a lot of men's rights activists. Like, recently, she her tweet was featured on an Amazing Atheist video.
Really?
And apparently
I don't like that guy.
Yeah, well, but she recently got a lot of shit for that because men's rights activists don't quite like her and have gone after her in several places. So, you know, it's
Amazing Atheist is a radical, isn't he?
I don't know. I think he's not anymore. He's kind of just lost his steam.
Maybe.
Yeah, but neither of these sides are absent of blame. They're humans. You know, there'll always be radical aspects to it. I think the reason that I wouldn't call myself a men's rights activist is because their complaints can largely be addressed without the men's rights moniker. You know, it's
Again,
Yeah.
I said this. Intellectually, academically, you're right, but practically, you can't start a movement which looks at the imbalance between men and women on the woman's favour. On the favour of women, and call yourself a feminist movement. I mean, it's not gonna take wind.
One thing we can definitely agree on, the stuff in the middle of the film where they start talking about what do they call it, false paternity, or where they're talking about women who are, like, DNA tests are not allowed at birth because I don't know why, and they say that like France has outright banned them, and if you do them. Yeah, like that's crazy. I think that's a bit.
Well, I mean, where there's almost 70% tax rates for top earning people in France. Again, I wouldn't put anything past the French at this point. I mean,
hey, they've got some good
themselves.
ideas there. Let's not put them down.
I think
not put them down too much.
Debate bubbling.
Yeah, maybe. But I found it interesting, considering we were talking about that in the polyamory episode of 1 in 5 kids being not genetically of their quote unquote fathers.
Every man's worst nightmare.
It is, yeah. No, I can
terrifying,
imagine.
actually.
Yeah, that is one area where I will definitely say that feminists need to reevaluate that, because that's one thing I wish that they pressed the feminist interviewees more on was to explain that. I'm almost like a Catholic searching for the explanation of this bit of the Bible that I don't understand. Like, what is your logic for this? We've got to have something here. If we're going to defend this at all, we need something. And if you don't have it, we need to get rid of it, because this is very bad. You know. Yeah,
totally. I don't think that the feminists that I'm complaining about. I just think they're ignorant. I think they haven't looked at these things properly. They're kind of unaware of these statistics, and they're unaware of what it's like to be what it's like to be a man in 2017. I think the ones that you seem to be friends with maybe are more academically sophisticated.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Maybe.
It's a strange thing. Looking back on the film, I mean, I don't know why it stirred up so much controversy.
It wasn't that controversial.
No, in the end, when it came out, I mean, it came out and a lot of people did reviews on it, and even feminists reviewed it and said, yeah, you know what, this it's not that much.
I think it goes back to what I said about it was a woman who presented it, and it was playing to the babyish identity politics, and that's the only reason why it
possibly, yeah, I think
it did so well. If it was a man doing it, everyone would be like, oh well, it's just another sexist guy.
Yeah, especially seeing as she flipped so quickly. If a man had basically gone in saying, I support the men's rights thing, and it would have probably been disregarded. And
even if the man was a feminist first and then changed his mind, I think it'd be disregarded.
Yeah, there's this thing about male feminists where a lot of people do question their authenticity. You know, the joke about white knights, and you know that's shit.
Trying to get laid kind of thing.
Yeah, and like the nice guy feminists, you know, who are just not really.
That's disingenuous though.
Yeah, it's not cool. I don't really like that term. It just. I mean, it happens, disturbingly enough, but it's
we all know people. We all know people like that.
yeah, no, but
it's still unfair, isn't it?
it's a bit harsh, but especially when it gets lobbed at a lot of guys. But yeah, the fact that she went into it with a very naive look and the diary entries, while I think they made for a worse film, probably diffused a lot of the controversy and the tension around that film. It affirms my point that I think most people just can agree, yeah, that's fucked up. We should probably do something about that. That's not cool, you know. Like,
Yeah, but it goes back to those ignorant people that I talk about who boycott it and try to shut it down without even having watched it, or don't want to hear the debate, or don't want to hear the other side of the argument.
it is one of those things where I don't think it's necessarily brainwashing that's going on, but I think it's one of those things that I don't understand why some of these things aren't being addressed. And like, there are feminist issues like that where women's issues that you think would have just been resolved by now, but aren't.
Because men are scared, aren't they? They're scared of being called sexist, and it's a way of dominating people through the language.
Well, this is where I go back to the patriarchy argument of men are meant to be these strong, silent type that never admit that there's a problem with us, and yeah, we're meant to just weather the storm. And
is that reinforced by women? Women going for as quote unquote alpha males, or whatever you want to call it. Supporting men who are like that and saying that that's a good trait.
Yeah, no, patriarchy doesn't just say, oh, this is all just men doing this. Women are included. That's why I said it's a system outside of people. It's just a designation. It's not meant to.
Is it a system which is natural though?
Well, I mean, there are plenty of tribes and ape relatives that aren't necessarily patriarchal, so it's not necessarily entirely natural, but it's pretty well rooted in most human cultures have some degree of patriarchal society, so it's pretty you could definitely make an argument for it being natural. But the argument against that is basically
civilization tames the animal.
Literally, it's meant to be, look, we acknowledge that this may have been natural at one point, it may have served a purpose, but we're trying to get past it, and I think a lot of people want to do that. Like, there's a lot of aspects of it that just don't help.
Surely it gets to a point then where you think the meaning of patriarchy is the word patriarchy is meaningless, and it just means how far away are we going to get from our animalistic state? Can we improve it?
Well, I mean, the whole point is equality. If you want to embrace patriarchy, then you have to embrace all of its worst aspect of toxic masculinity, of war, of testosterone, of men taking violent jobs and women always being at home. And I don't think those are necessary. The point of trying to make an egalitarian society like Star Trek or whatever is the idea that everyone has the choice. Everyone can do it.
It's a spectrum, isn't it? It's a spectrum, because when you give people the choice, as we've seen in Sweden, women still go for the more social jobs, and men go for the more kind of hardwired engineering or labour intensive roles. Yeah,
this is where I'm a bit more chill about this.
So,
is
patriarchy a natural state of man?
Well, in that sense, it wouldn't.
Or humankind.
Well,
patriarchy in that sentence.
No, I mean, in that sense, it would be patriarchy is still gone at that point, because even though men and women would still go for certain jobs, it's purely because of choice at that point, and society is at the top levels has been hopefully fixed by that. It's like no industry is going to have 50-50 all the time. Like, politicians are not going to be 50-50 women on every level, as much as we may try.
How far does that go? I mean, did you get... Okay, we all know that, for example, tall people are more likely to earn more than short people, and are more likely to have positions of power. This is a fact. So do you have quotes for short people? Do you have quotas for every single ethnicity? Where does it go?
This sort of thing gets brought up. This thing gets brought up a lot as being as trying to be an analogy for black rights or female rights, and trying to say, well, look at this other thing where people do better because they've got this type of brow or whatever, or this haircut gets, and it's like,
it's pretty well documented with the height stuff though.
Yeah, pretty extreme. No, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying that a study could come out tomorrow saying, oh, if you don't have strong eyebrows, you don't get the top positions, generally speaking. And that's acknowledging statistics, and it may be right, but it's not something that we consciously push, and it's not something that is.
I've seen it in the workplace. I have.
Yeah, but it's not a historic. Like women, literally 50 years ago, it would have been verbally said, you are not allowed to do this because you're a woman. I don't think that it's a widespread issue for tallists or shortists,
But we know that height is related to class as well. So it's actually a class system thing. Again, a lot of again, like it's funny for a guy who's so against Marxism that I'm interested in class so much.
Yeah.
But height is very closely related to class, so it's still there.
Yeah,
These
I mean
issues.
that's just acknowledging a phenotypical difference between classes. That's not necessarily that, like, that's correlation, not causation. Like you can say that,
Well,
yeah,
it's
tall
'cause-
people generally happen to be in this sort of class, but the class is what caused them to be in the, in terms of having more money
Well,
and
it's
whatever.
their class which made them
Yeah.
tall over time.
Yeah,
When you get positions of power, tall, not only just men but tall women and men
yeah,
do better.
they
So
do. Yeah, no.
how do you legislate against that? That's what I'm saying. I just it gets a bit silly. I think.
Well, I think it's kind of whataboutery. It's basically saying, look at this other thing that isn't actually something that we discriminate consciously about. It's just a thing, and like,
Conscious or was there much of a distinction there? Conscious or unconscious is there. People
Yeah.
feel it.
yeah. But the thing is, like, there are some things where, it's a matter of energy. It's a matter of, like, okay, the energy we would need to help short people out. Like, how many people are we helping there?
It
To
sounds silly saying it,
to
doesn't
what degree do we do it? It gets very tiring very quickly. Women are half the population. I think it's reasonable for them to expect equal treatment. Black people, like, they're a significant part of the population, and it's a very visible thing for them to be discriminated against for very conscious, dumb reasons. I think you could point out stuff like, oh, tall people get more stuff, but it's like, it's not conscious. It's not a large population thing. There are going to be some things that
I think
you
the size of
have
the
to.
population is
Yeah.
relevant. I think
Yeah.
that's. I don't know why that's relevant at all. But I think in terms of black rights, that's an issue we can both agree on. Women's rights, I don't think there is an issue now in 2017.
Well,
My experience in the workplace has been quite the opposite, actually.
well, I mean, we could keep going on this for hours. I mean, just circling it back around to the film for a little bit. What would you rate this film, since we're doing film reviews now?
I would say in terms of the content and the argument. Okay, the argument was poorly put together. The content was good, but the actual way the film was set up and the way that it was, as I said, putting the conclusion first and then backing it up, I thought it was a fairly weak way of presenting an argument.
I evaluate films based on how they put stuff together. I've seen a lot of documentaries have.
It was a bit boring, to be honest.
Yeah, it was, and it kept hammering on the same subject over and
Yeah.
over again, because
The paternity things went on and on.
It went on, and it's a point to make, definitely, but I think the fact that they made it on and on kind of weakened the point. It's like, wait, is that your only thing? I mean, it sucks, definitely, but it made it sound like it was a single issue. As a movie, like I said, I've seen plenty of student documentaries that are about on par with this or better. I may have made one or two of them, but
You made documentaries?
I've made a couple, but with friends
Really?
while I was in film
nice.
school. But yeah, it's not.
Link me up.
Yeah, sure. But this, it's not a good film. It doesn't make its point very well. I sympathise with the subject.
I think it made his point.
Yeah.
I think it the fact that it was so successful showed that it did make its point very well. But we know that the intricacies of how it did it wasn't quite.
I sympathise with the people in the film, but I think obviously they were very happy to show the feminists who are bad quite happily, but they didn't talk about the forms where men's rights activism does go into dark places, and I think that was
Alpha, beta, cock, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that was
That's really toxic.
It skirted around a lot of the issues, which I think made it a weaker film and made the point weaker for my own knowledge of what they're actually covering. They just showed the most sympathetic parts, which is good. Those things need to be highlighted, but the fact that it skirted around the dark sides of men's rights activism and pumped up the bad side of feminism made it feel quite disingenuous. And this goes back to that point I started off with, where the editing made me very much question what ideology went into making this film.
It's funny, because if I was doing a film on this subject, I would start off on an academic presentation. So this is what feminism is. This is the history of feminism. This is what first wave, second wave, and
it
third
did
wave
make a lot of
feminism is.
assumptions about what the audience knew.
Yeah, because most people don't know that. Most
exactly.
people aren't political junkies.
Exactly.
So I mean,
I didn't even think of that point, but it does skirt over all the definitions and everything, and doesn't show the history either. So
it needed that.
Yeah, as a film, I would give it, 4 or 5 out of 10.
I would say
Solid
about the
effort.
same,
Yeah, it tries. Bless it, it tries. Yeah, and sympathetic portrayals. There's some decent stuff in there, but this is where I do feel like she's it's a very amateur effort as a documentary. I don't think it's very impressively made or anything. So, yeah, pretty weak source.
Well, I think we agree on that, but I think
Yeah.
the topic of discussion in terms of ideology has been interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. But I think we can agree on some stuff. And
shake hands as usual.
all
and,
good
there we
stuff.
go.
But yeah, thanks for listening to our first review, guys.
Thank you.
And I should remember to pimp out our Patreon and our Twitter.
Yep.
It's James v James Pod
And,
on Twitter, and check us out on Patreon. Support us, throw us your money, make this happen. Yeah.
Well, share us with a friend. That's
Yeah, share
nice.
it around. It's been a good show. Hopefully we can make a load more. Thanks
Great.
for listening, everybody.
Cheers.